Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
I'm Cherylanne Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. Hello and welcome. This is episode 24 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. And I have to tell you, I always smile when I come to the 24th of anything because it's my birthday. And every time I hear the number 24 in any context, it's like it has this extra special little quality only to my ears. Do you do that? Do you, whatever your birthday is, when you hear that number, does it sort of hit you differently than any other? It's like my special little number. So when I realized that this was episode 24, I started thinking about 24, I guess. Where was I 24 years ago? Or what was I doing 24 weeks ago? So 24 years ago, this was somewhat more unsettling than I'd bargained for because I realized that 24 years ago, I was in college and I was getting ready for a summer internship with Procter & Gamble at their corporate headquarters in Cincinnati. And I had no way of knowing how much that would set the trajectory of my life for really a good long while up to and including today. That summer was a complete blast. P&G does a great internship program where they bring in college students from all over the country, probably all over the world, really. And if you're working in Cincinnati, where their corporate headquarters are, they arranged for different housing options. So we lived on a college campus in some apartments with a lot of other students, and it was just a really great summer. And the following year was when I accepted a full-time role with them, but I was in Atlanta. So when I started my P&G career, I was in Atlanta working in a regional sales office. The premise of today's episode really harkens all the way back to those days when I was a very young 20-year-old college graduate working for P&G in Atlanta. My first boss was a retired Marine who was an older gentleman nearing retirement. And he was my immediate manager, and he took me under his wing like, the daughter he never had. He was a mentor and a father figure and a great leader who just really had the respect of his organization. In fact, when he retired, he gave me his briefcase. And in it, there were like a few of these really treasured belongings that he had carried around with him for years and years. Nothing really like valuable other than sentimentally. And he was so disciplined and structured and ritualistic that literally where these objects, like there was like a calculator and a pencil case, where these things sat in his briefcase, which was a hard case, had grooves worn in the leather inside because these items had been so carefully and strategically placed for years and years in the same spot, which I just thought was the perfect metaphor for him. That man knew a thing or two about discipline. So in one of our very first meetings, he gave me the business card of his personal financial advisor. And he suggested that I set up an appointment with this guy. I remember him saying to me, his name was Jim. Even if you don't, I would really encourage you to take something out of your paycheck every single month and put it directly into either company stock or savings instead of having that deposited in your checking account. And he was explaining that if you adopted just this one little habit, that you could really build up a pretty healthy savings over time without ever having to think about it again. Now, I didn't have the heart to tell him that this was the exact same advice my parents had given me. But I thought, if all of these wise people in my life were giving me the same advice, it probably was a good indication that I should pay attention to it. So I took his advice and, I think I started putting like $100 a paycheck into this account from that day on. And it was really such a little bit of money. It was barely noticeable to me. I just stayed really faithful to the process. I think because I'd automated it. I had it taken out automatically and put into stock or something. And when I look back now at the value of just that one account 24 years later, it's hard to believe what's happened to it. If you've done this, you've had the same experience. It's that value of compound interest. It's the consistency of putting the same amount, even a small amount, away for a long period of time. And in fact, what that really is an example of the pay yourself first approach to budgeting or investing or savings. It's really widely accepted in financial circles as the simplest path to accruing savings because it's temptation proof. The idea is when you get paid, before you ever see it, before you ever have a chance to spend it, you put this predetermined amount of money away. And if it never comes into your bank account where you have access to it, then you really can't be tempted to spend it on, a new outfit or plane tickets to somewhere instead of your portfolio. The practice of doing it first, taking it out as soon as a paycheck comes in, lets you be consistent without even really trying. And it's the consistency that delivers results, right? But if you don't do that, if you don't take it out first and the money comes into your checking account, the temptation is to spend it, right? Because especially as a 20-year-old, it's sitting there in front of you. You're looking at the money, so you think, well, I have it available to me to spend on dinner or dates or whatever I want to do.
Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
What does all this have to do with balance and time management? Well, as it turns out, everything. It has everything to do with it. So let's kind of unpack that a little bit and see if you can make the connection. Let's say that you're at the start of a brand new month and turn the calendar to a new page. There's 30 whole days stretching out in front of you, like those blank little white boxes, and they're just waiting to be filled. Except when you turn the page to a new month, those days are not actually blank, are they? If you look ahead, I bet right now at the next 30 days of your life, there are already appointments plotted in there, starting to clamor for your time and your attention. There's maybe meetings that have already been scheduled or lunch dates, or maybe there's sporting events and practices. If you're like me, you have about 1 million of those. Concerts or performances, or maybe even family gatherings that have been scheduled. So if you look ahead at the next 30 days, it's not really a blank slate. There are some things that are already in there. And if you're not careful, the whole month could go on that way, and it could be completely consumed before it even begins, which is kind of like your paycheck, right? So here's where that old school money management trick really comes into play. Think about applying the pay yourself first principle to your time, to your calendar. So right now, before it has a chance to get filled up, go take a look at the first calendar page that's still mostly blank. And I'm going to guess that it's probably 2 months out. It could even be 3 months out where you're going to start to see a fair amount of white space. And start protecting time on that page for whatever you have declared your most important priorities, right? And I want you to think about the things that you always say you want to do, but you can't seem to find the time for. What are those things that you're like, oh, I would do this if I could just find the time, but I don't have the time? What I want you to try is booking the time for those things now. All right, and protecting it. So later, when you actually come upon that month, you'll be able to squeeze in all the, kind of run-of-the-mill meetings and appointments around the edges, because you'll be confident that your most important priorities, the things you really want to get to, have already been laid in there. They've already been protected. I'm going to tell you, this is how you establish balance. You do it with intention. You look ahead and you decide, what are the things that I'm going to make time for? And I'm going to make everything else fit in around the edges. Because I said this in a call the other day, the work will expand to fill the time available, right? There's a principle behind that if you have 2 hours to do something, you'll take 2 hours. If you only have an hour, you will find a way to get it done in an hour, right? You'll make the choices to simplify. So imagine if you protected maybe just a couple of hours a week for something that you really feel strongly would improve your life or would be an important piece of your legacy or your work. Maybe it's time for connection with somebody that you care about and you feel like you don't get to see very often. Maybe it's something for yourself, like exercise, which I hear all the time, right, as one of the leading things that women want to get to and can't figure out how to fit in. So what would you use it for? What would you protect time for? What is your equivalent of, the $100 per paycheck, that little bit of time that you protect for something really special to you? Would you use it for exercise? Would you use it to read? Would you use it to have one-on-one time with your spouse? Would you use it to write? Maybe you want to write a book or a blog. Or maybe you've always thought about learning a language and you could spend a couple of hours a week progressing toward being, fluent in Italian. Or maybe it's getting your home organized and you need a couple of hours a week to really bring order to your home that's gotten a little overrun with clutter. If you did that, if you just protected a couple of hours a week, too, by this time next year, you'd have invested more than 100 hours against that priority. And think about how that adds up. Just like in my story, that $100 a month into an investment adds up. What could you accomplish with 100 hours in the next year? Think about that. This exact practice is one that I teach the women in my coaching program. And I have to tell you, it's transformative in its simplicity, right? It's not a complicated principle. You're probably sitting there thinking, well, duh, right? But are you doing it? So I would strongly encourage you to give this a try, especially, if you keep wondering why you're not making progress against something that you really care about. If you're stalled out on some activity that you keep saying you're going to get to, you keep saying you're going to make time for it, and then you keep asking yourself why it never happens, right? Why does all the time just disappear? This principle of paying yourself first with your time and protecting that time for you, for the thing that you care about, really can change everything as you get to the end of this month or the end of this year and look backwards at what you've been able to accomplish. So I'm going to keep it at that today. We're going to keep this one short and sweet because the principle is very simple. And I want you to really kind of think about how you might apply this. Get that calendar out, look ahead a couple of months where you see the white space, and choose the thing that you're going to protect space for and see if you can hold on to that even as the meeting requests come rushing in, even as the practice schedules get released. Even as, people start clamoring for your time, see if you really can unapologetically protect that time and space for yourself. I want to go back to the beginning of this story where we were talking about Jim, my first boss and my mentor, really. And I've had a lot of mentors over the years. I've been really fortunate to have wise counsel from really good people who gave me guidance and shared their kind of hard-earned wisdom with me to keep me moving in a positive direction. And that's what we're going to talk about in next week's episode. We're going to talk about mentors. We're really going to dig into an option that you may never have thought about exploring when you can't find the right mentor in your network, right? So sometimes when we're looking for a mentor, we're only looking in a very closed circle. People we already know personally at work or in our community. But sometimes the mentor that you need doesn't really exist in that environment. And so what we're going to talk about is what are some options that you can explore when you know you need the guidance, but you don't really have the person identified who can provide it. So that's it for today. I would love for you, since we kept this one short, to take just a second, if you would, to rate the show. It's really been important to me to hear your feedback about what you're liking, what you want to hear more of, topic ideas. So if you go to your app where you're listening to the podcast and you'll see a spot, it says see more episodes, scroll down until you see it should be a big number 5 with our current rating, and then some blank stars to leave your rating or write a short review. I read every single one of those. I really appreciate your thoughts and your encouragement. If you would take a second to do that this week, I would love it. Till next week, my friends, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.